In the previous session, we looked at various storage and database services which Google Cloud offers. And we focused on storage in the previous session on Friday, when we looked at different types of storage services. And I basically talked about that what are three main common storage types available, which is object storage, block storage, which is known as disk and volume, and then file storage, which is your file servers. So that's what we talked about. When it comes to object storage, we have a Google Cloud Storage object storage service in the name of Cloud Storage Bucket that we use. And that Cloud Storage Bucket is an object storage because it has the capability to support unlimited storage. It's unlimited exabytes of storage. And it also provides you cost-effective measurements in terms of storage classes so that you can store the data based on its access frequency. That's what we talked about. So we primarily focused on cloud storage. So for those who could not attend the session or who were not there in the session, this is where they can understand the different storage classes which are there. These are the storage classes. So in the session, I also showed you the comparison between the storage cost across Azure, AWS, and GCP for standard storage class. And you actually notice that when it comes to cloud storage or when it comes to object storage, the cost of storage is actually less in Google Cloud as compared to Azure and AWS. AWS has the highest cost, Azure comes in between, and Google storage is lowest. It doesn't mean that it is cheaper. I'm saying it is cheaper, then it doesn't mean that it doesn't have capabilities. No, the capabilities and the facilities or the features that it provides is almost the same. So these are the storage classes that you can see. Just have a look at it and let me know if you have any questions from the storage classes perspective. Then we looked at various capabilities that cloud storage basically provides. Data import services. And throughout the session, I was doing comparison with with storage services of AWS and Azure, that how it happens in AWS and Azure. So that's where we stop the session, which is choosing a storage class. Now, what are we going to do in today's session? In today's session, we are going to focus on the hands-on lab for the cloud storage bucket. So let's navigate to our console. And in the console, you need to make sure that you are in the Nextern project. People who are using my lab, they need to make sure that you're doing the provisioning in Nextern project. And learners who have their own hands-on lab environment, Google Cloud free trial, they can continue to use it. So what we need to do, we need to first select the project where you want to do this provisioning. And after that, you need to click on these navigation menu and navigate to cloud storage option. And over there, you need to click on buckets. OK, now here you need to click on buckets. Now, the other thing that you need to remember, guys, this is a paid account. This is not a trial account. It's a paid account. So whatever resources you are provisioning, you will need to delete those resources also at the end of the session yourself. So over here, you see cloud storage bucket dashboard, wherein it shows you some notifications. For example, it says that beginning on April 2019, at scale policy analysis and advanced IAM recommendation capabilities will require Security Command Center premium license. Just a notification from Google. It shows that soft delete is now available. So what is that soft delete? It says that when enabled on a bucket, this is similar to Azure. Soft delete protects objects from accidental or malicious deletion. A 7-day soft delete policy has been added to all existing buckets. This is the default policy for new buckets. So which means that if you delete any object from your bucket, Google will retain that object for 7 days. At any point in time within 7 days, you can retain your object. You can recover your object. That's what soft delete is, which is now available. Something that was not available in Google Cloud Storage bucket in the past. OK, that's it. You see a lot of recommendations here. Some security recommendations are also here. OK, so we'll leave that part. We'll just ignore everything, X out of it. And now it says that these are the buckets that you have. So how many buckets do we have right now, guys?
And 0.
Not even a single bucket. Let's go ahead and provision the bucket. So please follow me while I'll provision the bucket. We'll hit on create bucket. We can either click on create bucket here, or we can click on create button here also. So when you hit create bucket, it will ask you a couple of options basically, right? So we'll start with the name of the bucket. Now, when it comes to name, you need to follow the naming guidelines. Why? Because it says your bucket is globally unique. 2 customers in Google Cloud cannot have a bucket with the same name. It's unique. Permanent name. Permanent name basically means once you create a bucket, you cannot change its name because it will create a DNS configuration of that bucket. It will provide you a bucket URL using which you can access the bucket. So you will not be able to change the name. Plus, Google doesn't allow you to create a bucket or any resource with uppercase. You will always use lowercase numbers, symbols, and letters. That's what you need to know. Then if you want to see the naming guidelines, you can open it in a new tab. And here it will take you to the naming guidelines, which is the name considerations, which says bucket name reside in a single namespace that all the cloud storage users uses. Bucket names are publicly visible. Don't use user ID, email address, or project names in the bucket name because it's publicly visible. The URL contains your bucket name. So never ever put any personal identifiable or any classified information in the bucket name. It says once you delete a bucket, anyone can reuse its name for a new bucket. The moment you delete the bucket, somebody else can create a bucket with the same name. But you will not have 2 buckets with the same name at any point in time. So these are your naming conventions for the bucket. It says following are examples of valid bucket names. For example, my travel maps, or like this combination. If you use this, which says test.example.com, then you need to verify the ownership of example.com. So don't do this. These are not valid examples. Why? It says it has uppercase. It doesn't allow uppercase. You cannot use Google as a word in your bucket name. It says contains Google. You cannot use space in your bucket name. So space is not allowed, special keyword Google is not allowed, uppercase is not allowed. And if you use any domain name, then you need to verify the ownership of that domain also. Otherwise, you won't be able to use it. So these are my bucket naming conventions that I need to be aware of. So I'll put that into the chat window for your reference. OK, so we'll go back to the previous tab and we'll select a name. I'll say this is my testing GCS bucket -2024. That's the name I'm taking. So we are good with the name. Then we'll hit continue. We've selected the name. Now next, don't create multi-region bucket, guys. This was unnecessarily increase the cost. Create a regional bucket. I've already explained you what a multi-region regional bucket is, and how replication of data happens. That is more than sufficient. Don't create a multi-region bucket. It will unnecessarily shoot the cost. So we'll create a regional bucket and we'll select our region. So we'll create our bucket in US East 1 because that's where the cost is very low. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, sir.
Next, then comes the storage class for the bucket. Now we all will go with a standard storage class. Why? Because we want to practice a lot of activities. We want to upload some data. We want to download data. We want to practice. So we'll go with standard. We'll not go with nearline, cold line or archive. This is something that we will explore using lifecycle policies. So we'll go with standard. Don't choose auto class. This is similar to intelligent tiering in AWS. Then it will automatically pick up a class that I don't want it to use. So we'll go with standard. Then comes choose how to control access to objects, which is very important. That how do you control access? So by default, your bucket will not be accessible over the internet. The public access will be disabled, right? So it says enforce public access prevention on this bucket. This is the default configuration that I want. So I will keep this box checked. Then it says access control. You want uniform or fine grained. This is similar to ACL and AWS. Azure doesn't have this capability. Azure has option of change access tier. So here it is uniform and fine grained. So I'll go with the default policy. Default security I'm going right now. Then comes next. So click on continue. After making selection, you need to click continue so that next option appears. Then comes choose how to protect object data. This is where data protection is coming up, which says that if you delete anything, it will be preserved for 7 days. Since this is a lab exercise, we will complete the bucket topic today, move on to the new topic tomorrow. So we don't need to preserve any data, right? So we'll uncheck this box, but you just understand the benefit of this, that if you check this box and put any time frame here, I'm say 7 days, 30 days or whatever, the data that you delete from the bucket will get preserved. It is like recycle bin. By default, it preserves any deleted file and folder for 30 days. So that's the concept. I will uncheck it. Then it says object versioning. Now versioning basically means keeping the same files, keeping multiple versions of the same object. Something that is not allowed in a typical operating system. You cannot put a file, I'm saying you cannot create 2 files with the same name. It will always override the previous one. But this is allowed in Google with the versioning, and versioning is a common topic in all the 3 cloud service providers. So we'll go with versioning. If we don't enable it, I'm just explaining it. And then retention. Retention is basically for compliance, which is for preventing the deletion or modification. This is similar to object lock. Object lock in AWS is a service that protects your bucket and its object from accidental deletion or modification. So we are not checking any of these boxes because we will need to delete our bucket once we are done with the lab exercises. But I have explained you the concepts that what do we use these services for and in what scenarios we should be using. So definitely in a production environment, you must always go with configuring these services. Are you with me on this?
Yes, sir.
Great. So then comes next, which is encryption. Now, when it comes to encryption, we have 2 options, as I said. By default, Google will ensure encrypting your data at rest when it is stored in Google data center. So Google will do encryption. But when Google does encryption, it will use its own managed keys. This is similar to platform managed keys in Azure or AWS managed keys in AWS, which is Google managed keys. The drawback of this approach is that if I use Google managed keys, the challenge is that if Google is using its keys to encrypt the data, can Google not decrypt the data? Yes, no, maybe. Can Google not decrypt my data if it can encrypt the data? I'm talking about the capability, not the intention. So Madan is saying that Google cannot decrypt the data. Okay, what about other participants? They will have a key because it's their managed key. If I select the first radio button, it's Google key. They will use it to encrypt my objects that I store in my bucket. And they can always use the same key to decrypt the bucket and its object and read what is there. So Google can always do that. And that is why customers typically go with customer managed encryption keys. Okay, now let's understand. So you have your home and then you ask your neighbor to use their lock to lock your home. And your neighbor keeps the key with them, right? Can your neighbor not open the door? Yes, they can because they have the key. Now, in the other case, you will ask your neighbor to purchase a separate lock for yourself and use it to lock your house. Can your neighbor not open the door? Yes, they can open the door. So understand this concept, which is very important in cloud. Give me a moment here. Let me open the transcript. Data protection in Google Cloud. Okay, so my first option is Google managed keys. My second option is that I'm looking at, which is customer managed encryption keys. Which is known as CMEK. And the first is Google managed encryption key. I can say GMEK. These are my two options. Now my question is on the first one, that can Google, if needed, access my data when my data is encrypted with this Google managed keys? And collectively, all of you are saying yes, that yes, Google can do it because it's their encryption keys. They always have access to it. They can use it. They can access my data. Then my second question is, if I go with this approach, which is customer managed encryption keys, and encrypt my data, whether it's an object in the bucket, whether it's a database, whether it's a disk, or whether it's any data repository service. When I use a customer managed encryption key, can Google access my data or not? Okay. So let's do a poll. Whosoever feels that Google can still access the data, please raise your hands. With the customer managed encryption keys, if you feel that Google will still be able to access the data, please raise your hands. I'm saying that it is not
Yeah, go
about
ahead.
capability, it is about intention also. So when I say can Google access the data, I'm talking about both capability and intention. Okay, now those learners who feel that Google cannot access it, please raise your hands.
Yes, for me, I'm thinking yes.
So you're saying that Google will not be able to access. Rakesh is saying that Google is not
No,
able to
I'm saying
access.
Google will. No, I'm saying Google will be able to access.
Okay, you're
I
saying
think.
Google will be able to access. And others are saying Google is not able to access. Okay. Guys, in both the scenarios, Google can access your data. In both the scenarios. If Google wants, as I said, it's not about capability, it's about intention also. If Google has intention, legitimate intention, Google can access your data. This is like Gmail. Can Google not read your emails? Google actually does that. That is why Google is able to position ads related to your search history, related to the communication that you're doing in Gmail. So Google actually does it. So Google can do it. So I was saying that Google can access your data in both the situations. Now understand it with this example that in the first case, so same example of your house, you have a 3 BHK flat, you have a security guard in the name of Google, and then security guard is using his own lock and key. In the first example, security guard is using his own lock and key to lock your flat. Can security guard not open it? Yes, because it's his lock. He can open it. Then in the second case, you purchased a lock from security guard and you use that lock and key to protect your assets. Can security guard not open it? Yes, because it is the lock that security guard has manufactured. Security guard has the master key of it. Security guard can anytime, if needed, if there is an intention, break open the door because they have, it is their software. Understand, guys? See, cloud is all about security. If you really want to excel in cloud domain, understand the security aspect of each and everything. So yes, Google can always access your data if there is a legitimate need. And that is why we have third option, which is bring your own keys, BYOK. Now the third option, you go out in the market and you purchase a lock for yourself. Now you have all the keys of that lock. Your security guard is not having access to the key. Now, can they open it? No, they cannot open it. Now they will need to break open the door. They cannot open the lock. And if they break open the door, then you will come to know that there has been an attack or there has been an attempt to compromise the data. You will get to know about it if they ever do that. So this is the option. Bring your own keys, BYOK. This is the only security in cloud that you can think of. And that's what most of the financial organization go with. Any bank who is using Google Cloud or any other cloud for hosting their data, they never go with native encryption service. They always go with their own encryption service. So what they do, they bring their own keys, BYOK. And the question is, where do they get the keys? So for that, you have a solution with the name hardware security module. So this hardware security module is FIPS-140 compliant, which is an encryption standard, strongest encryption standard. This is hardware security module. We also call it HSM in short. So what businesses do, they either they purchase an HSM device and then they use that device to generate encryption keys, and then they upload those encryption keys into the cloud, and using those keys, they encrypt the data. Now Google cannot access it. Google will not be able to access it unless Google have access to the device from where the encryption key was generated. That Google will never know because your key will never have reference to the source, right? So it is like you have a lock that doesn't show its branding. So the security guard will never be able to read that, OK, this is from Harrison, this is from Link, and they will be able to kind of get a master key for Harrison or Link. No, there is no branding on the key. It is just an encryption key. Nobody knows where it came from. And unless you don't know where it came from, you will not be able to break it. So that's the option, which is known as HSM hardware security module that you can use. Now, the other thing is what cloud service provider has started doing. When they saw that they have a very low adoption from financial industry, from financial services industry, what they started to do, they provided cloud HSM. They started to provide cloud HSM service, which means instead of you investing into an HSM solution, cloud service provider has invested into an HSM solution. Now you can use that HSM. I'm saying you can rent out that HSM device to generate your encryption keys. But I will say the same thing. as long as it belongs to your service provider, they will always have a master key. They will always have a supreme level of access to break open it. So the only option that you have is bring your own keys. So nobody knows where exactly you have purchased that lock, which vendor it is coming from. It will have no information. That's the only option that you have. You want to see how HSM device looks like? You can see it here. Hardware security module. Images. This is how an HSM device looks like. This is a Thales, which is a leader in encryption technologies. This is the HSM device. You can see other devices also from other companies. So Thales is a leader. Cipher is another company, which is also, I would say, at number second place when it comes to HSM. So these are the companies that they are basically the leaders of HSM. You can see how HSM works. So it says this is your server, this is your HSM device. So server requests a cryptographic operation, signs a digital certificate. HSM device provides the key, and with that key, you basically see the object. So it's like bring your own keys option. So this is the only option that you need to go for, which is bring your own keys. You can also take, you can also get those keys from a third party HSM also. I'm saying if you don't have enough budget to purchase your own HSM service, there are players who provide HSM services. You don't tell them that where you are going to use that key. And you don't tell Google Cloud where this key is coming from. That's it. That's the trick here. So if you have your own HSM device, well and good. But if you're taking a service from a third party, then you don't tell the third party that where exactly you're going to use this key. And you don't tell Google Cloud where the key is coming from. Done. You're 100% protected with this approach. Any question on this, guys? And this is data protection, not in Google Cloud. This is data protection in cloud. This is applicable for all the public cloud service provider, because that is where we will always run with the risk of losing our data, getting our data leaked by cloud service providers, employees, or third parties. Any question on this? Okay, let's move on. So we'll select the same option. So we'll not select, I'm saying we are not going with CMK right now, but I've just explained what CMK is. We'll probably do it later on. So let's just go with Google managed key. And with that information in place, you can hit create. That will create your first bucket. It says public access will be prevented. It says this bucket is set to prevent exposure of its data on the public internet. Keep this setting enabled unless you have a use case that requires public access. So it says that by default, the configuration that you have chosen, this configuration would not allow the bucket and its object to be accessible over the network, over the public network. However, if you have a legitimate use case wherein you want the bucket and its object to be accessible over the public internet, for example, you want to host a static website, in that case, you can change the configuration later on also. It says enforce public access prevention on that bucket. So I'll say confirm. So the bucket that is going to be created, that bucket will not have public access on it. My bucket is getting created. Why do I not see buckets from others? Guys, have you not created the buckets yet? Okay, I see 2 buckets now. All right, now that I have got my bucket created, the first thing that you do after the bucket is created is to upload data into the bucket. That's the very first thing that you need to do. Upload data into the bucket, right? How do I upload data into the bucket? See, I have multiple options. I can create a folder. I can upload a folder. I can upload a file also, right? So if I want to create a folder in the console itself, I can click on create folder and I can put a folder, let's say my name, Raghuveer_Singh, create. So it has created a folder. I can go inside this folder and here I can upload files, or inside this folder, I can upload a folder also. I'm said nested folders, or I can come to the main root of the bucket over here. This is the root of the bucket and I can upload files. So let's say I will upload files in the root of the bucket. So I'll click on upload files. When I hit upload files, I can actually upload files from my system, whatever files I want to upload. So I'll upload some data into the bucket. Don't upload any large file. It will unnecessarily choke the bandwidth. Just upload any 1 or 2 files in the bucket. Okay, 5 files are uploaded into the bucket. You just need to refresh. You can see here those files. So I've got a couple of files uploaded into the bucket here. You can see. So this is how you upload the files. Now let's say you want to move. I'm saying you want to move the files into the folder. So upload, create, transfer data. Then this is your transfer data in and out request, which is when you want to transfer bulk data from your bucket to your data center or from your data center to your bucket. This is the option, right? So these are the options now. So first is uploading the data into the bucket, the operations that we are focusing on. Give me a moment. This is from previous training. Okay. So we are provisioning a cloud storage bucket with default configuration. That's the first thing that we are doing. And after this, we are uploading some objects, some files. In cloud language, we call them objects from our local system. Uploading. Then you also learn how downloading files from Google Cloud Storage bucket to your local system, deleting the objects. These are what we are trying to do. These are the hands-on lab that we are trying here. I'll keep on adding more. Let's navigate to the bucket. So here's the bucket. Let's say I want to delete this folder. I can select it, hit delete, and just type delete to confirm to delete this folder. That's how you can delete it. The folder is getting deleted. If you want to delete a file, same, just select the file, hit delete. Let's say you want to download some data from this bucket to your local system. You can select multiple files and download them in one go. You can select multiple files and delete them also in one go. So I'll just show you for one file. Let's say I want to download one of the file. Just select the file and click on download. The file will get downloaded on your local system like this. It will ask you an option to select the location on your local system to download the file. So that's how file will get downloaded on the local system. So these are the options that we have here on the front page. Is everyone with me on this? Now, let's say, as we know that the current configuration of the bucket is to not allow public access, which means neither my bucket nor the objects in the bucket are accessible over the internet. How do I check? I can click on one of the object in the bucket, wherein I will see the URL of that object, authenticated URL. I'll copy that URL and try to access it. I'll open another browser. Let's say Firefox. And put that URL into the Firefox browser. It's a proper URL. You can see https:// storage.cloud.google.com -name of your bucket -name of your document. That's how it is. If I put it, it will ask me to sign in. I'm not able to access it. It is asking me to sign in. Right? Because this document is not available over the internet. Because the bucket, you can see here, if you look carefully, you can see the public access is not public. So this URL will only work when you sign into the console, and if you have access to this bucket, you will be able to access it. So we'll go back. Now let's say I want my object to be accessible. But before we do that, let's look at the other options. So that's how we can confirm that this bucket is not accessible over the internet. In fact, if I go back to this document over here, when it is asking me to sign in, if I put the URL once again, and from the URL, if I just remove the object name and only keep the bucket name here and hit enter, it will also ask me to sign in, which means nobody can access it over the internet unless they sign in. And the moment you sign in with an ID that is not added to this bucket, you will not be able to access it. So let's move on to the next option, which is configuration. Now let's see what all configuration options are available here. So when it comes to the configuration, you will see a lot of information here. For example, who created this bucket? When was the last time this bucket was updated? Location type, it's a regional bucket in US East South California. Our application is not enabled. Default storage class is standard. I can change the storage class here. So this is the changes that you can do in the configuration tab. You can change the storage class also, but I'm not doing that. You can also enable requester pay. Now, what is this requester pay? This is a new capability that they have added in all the three clouds, which basically means that request for this bucket's data will be built to the requester project instead of the bucket owner. Now, what happens? Let's say the bucket contains some files, and those files are being requested by external parties, by external entities. So that request, read and write request, is typically paid by the bucket owner. The charges are paid by the bucket owner. But in this case, if you turn on this requester pay option, then the cost of the data transfer or the access cost will be charged from the requester service. That's the concept. Tags, if you want, you can enable some tags. Labels, you can put labels. This is the Cloud Console URL. I'm saying this is the URL through which you can access this bucket. However, even if you copy this URL and put that URL into a browser, it will still ask you to sign in because nothing is publicly accessible here. So I'll put this URL here. You can see it will ask me to sign in. And I can only access when I am the authenticated user, right? Then you can see the access control uniform. Public access prevention is enabled. Public access status is not public. Soft delete is off. So you see all the configuration, and wheresoever you see this pencil sign, it means you can change the configuration. Wherever it doesn't give you an option, you cannot change it. You can change the encryption type of the objects also. So these are my configuration page. Next is permission. Now on the permission, there are two things which I can play with. First is public access. Right now, this is not enabled for public access, and access control is uniform, which is no object level ACL is enabled. You cannot make any object in the bucket accessible over the internet. That's what access control is. So these are the two options. So I can change them. I can change to fine grained, and I can remove the public access prevention also. And I can also see the principals who have permission at this moment. Principals who have permission to this bucket. So you can see all the principals, their permissions. For example, I have given you guys storage admin access, which means you can manage all aspects of this bucket. So wheresoever it says next turn, these are all the principles that has been granted access. Storage admin access, which provides you full access on the bucket and all the capabilities related to it. So these are the principals who have access to this bucket. You can see by role also that how many storage admins on this bucket are. 8 storage admins are there. So you see all the options. Then comes next, which is protection. Protection basically means any capability that will help you to protect the objects and bucket is available here. However, some capabilities cannot be enabled after the bucket is created. So you can see here in the protection page, I can enable soft delete, which is available. I can enable versioning, which is right now off. I can enable I'm say the bucket retention policy. I can configure it. Object retention, I cannot enable it. So these are some of the additional settings that I can do. Okay, so that's the protection part. Then comes life cycle. Now, what is this life cycle? If you remember in the last session, I talked about that if you have thousands of objects in the bucket, so if you have thousands of objects in the bucket and your monthly cost of the bucket is is going higher and higher, and you want to optimize the cost, but you don't want to do it manually. Google provides you lifecycle policy, which basically means that you can put some logic, some some criteria. Based on that criteria, the objects in the bucket will move from a higher class to a lower class, from standard to nearline, cold line, and to archive. That's what object will do. And that way you will be able to save a lot of cost, because on Friday I showed you the pricing calculator. I showed you that what 1 terabyte of storage cost you in standard and what it would cost you across nearline, cold line, and archive. So let's create some lifecycle rules. So we'll click on lifecycle rules and we will add a rule here. So these are the options that we have. I'm saying you can pick and choose one of them. You cannot create a custom lifecycle rule. You will only be able to exercise the options which are available. For example, the first rule says set storage class to nearline. Right now, your storage class is standard. Best for backup and data access less than a month. It says any data that is accessed once in a month, you can put that into nearline. It says cold line and archive objects will not be changed to nearline. So there is a condition that cold line and archive would not go to nearline. So I can select this set storage class to nearline. I can hit continue. Then I will need to provide some logic, some criteria to this rule. For example, my rule is that the objects will move to cold line storage. That's what my criteria is. So how will I apply this criteria? It says first rule scope, which is the first thing, which basically means what if my bucket contains thousands of objects? Are all the objects, moved to the next class, the next lower cost class, or some of the objects? What if I want to move some specific objects? Then I can use the prefixes also, prefix and suffix. So if I'm using if in my project I'm using some nomenclature wherein there is a prefix and suffix that defines the projects or that defines the bucket objective, I can use it here. So I can say any bucket that has suffix as next on. This is my logic. Any object name that matches this prefix next turn, this rule will apply to that object only. Or I can also click on suffix also. So right now, what I'll do, I'll go with all. I'll say that the rule applies to all. I'm not selecting any criteria here. Then the next is set conditions. This is the condition. My rule is that it will move my objects from one class to another, but on what condition, on what grounds? So that is where I can select the condition, which is age. I can send it to the next class based on age. Age basically means counted from the object creation date. So I can say that by default, any data that I put into this bucket, 30 days after, please move that object to another class. That's one criteria. So I can say 30 days. So after 30 days, the object will be moved to another class. That's one criteria. The other criteria is created date also. Now make sure that you don't select conflicting criterias. Otherwise, the rule will not work. It says created before also, but these two are conflicting. I cannot put age and created before at the same time. So I will say created before. I can say any object that was created before. Here I can put the creation date. I can select it from here. Let's say any object that was created before January 1st, 2024, please move it. Or I can also select the other criteria, which is created before January 2024 plus its storage class matches standard. Any object that is in standard storage class created before January 1st, 2024. That's the logic. Then I can also say number of newer versions. If I have versioning enabled, then the question is that how many versions I will need to retain. I can put it here. Let's say 2 versions, the 2 newer versions you retain and the older versions that were created before January 1st, 2024, and those are in standard storage, please move them. Next, days since becoming non-current, I can select, but since I'm selecting newer versions, this will conflict. Became non-current before, live state, days since custom time before. So these are my conditions. So after I select my conditions, I can click on continue and I can create this rule. So what this rule is doing, this rule will now move objects to nearline storage on this condition, which is created on or before January 1st, 2024 with 2 plus newer versions, storage class matches standard. Any object that is currently in standard storage class that was created before January 1st, 2024, which has multiple versions, 2 newer versions will be retained and rest of them will be moved to nearline. That's my first criteria. So that's the concept of life cycle rules. Obviously, once you create a rule, it may take up to 24 hours to take effect. The rule that you have just created, this rule will not take effect. I'm saying this rule will run tomorrow, but it will find all the objects. Those were added or those age is not even 24 hours because we've just added them, uploaded them in the bucket. So that's the logic that you need to remember. We can create another rule. And if you want to delete all the rules, you can delete it. If you want to delete one of the rules, you can navigate to that rule and click on delete for that rule only. We can create one more rule, which is delete object, which is very important. So I'll say that I'm creating a delete. See, if I move anything to a lower class, I will still pay for it. But what if I can identify a criteria which says that delete an object after a specific date? For example, banks are supposed to keep last 10 years of your transaction data beyond which they are not supposed to keep. So they can probably delete it. So I can put a delete criteria. It says objects cannot be restored after deletion unless you have object versioning enabled. So we'll go with delete criteria. Continue. And the criteria, I'll say that delete any object for which storage classes matches and age is this. So I say delete any object that is, I would say 3650 days old, which is 10 years old. And the object must be in archive because that would be my criteria. I am moving objects from one class to another. So obviously any object that is too old, that will be in archive. So I'm saying that any object that I'm storing in archive, which is my lowest cost storage, and if it is 3650 days old, please go ahead and delete it. I don't need it. My compliance doesn't require me to store or retain any data beyond 10 years. So I will delete it. So that way I can create another criteria. Similarly, I can think of now whatever rules I'm showing you, they are the actual rules that I have configured in the production environment for the customers that I support, or I have seen in the production environment for the customers that I go and do audit for. This is how the rules are configured. Next, I can put another, which is set storage class to archive. See, I've created a rule for archive, but if there is no object in the archive, then rule will not work. Rule will not be of any use. It's like a stale entry. So I'm putting in condition for archive also. I'm saying that any object based on the access frequency, I will say. Days since becoming non-current. If I say that any object that has not been accessed, or non-current basically means the object has not been accessed. It says counted from when a live object was modified or deleted. So if there is any object which was not modified, which was not deleted, which was not accessed in the last 180 days, please go ahead and move that object to archive. So I will only pay archive storage cost on that object. And once that object age is 3650 days, which is 10 years, please delete that object. So this is how I can create lifecycle policies. Please make sure when you are creating lifecycle policies, the policies must not conflict. If policies conflict, they will not work and you may have performance issues, or you may get inflated bill from GCP also, because GCP will charge you for the activity, whether it is making sense or not. So please make sure that you configure the lifecycle rule very carefully for your client environment. And I've created 3 lifecycle rules, and they are the 3 lifecycle rules which are configured in most of the production environment, wherein you have one rule that basically moves objects from one storage class to another based on certain criteria. You have another rule that basically picks up the object from the lowest cost storage class, which is archive, after a certain age and deletes it. And then you have another rule that that also picks object based on certain decisions. So this is about lifecycle rule. I'm open to questions if you have any on this.
No, from my side, sir.
Okay, great. Let's move on. So we are done with this. Next is, so we are done with life cycle. That's the only thing in the life cycle tab. Next is observability. Observability basically means monitoring. See, right now, this is a lab exercise. You have 5, 6, 10 objects in the bucket. But in a production environment, you will have thousands of hundreds of thousands, terabytes of storage, terabytes of objects stored in the bucket. So observability is very important from the access point of view, from the total storage point of view, from how those objects are being requested, all that. So observability is the monitoring data that you see here. So you can see server error rate, I'm saying when objects are being requested from the bucket, if there is any error which is coming, client error rate, read errors, if applications are reading objects from the bucket, are they encountering any errors, write errors, total read write get request per count, data ingress over the network, data egress, total storage by object state, deleted by churn. So you get a lot of monitoring data. If you have any specific requirements and you feel that what is coming by default is not sufficient, I need more, you can also create custom observability matrices. That's also available. For example, you want to see total number of objects in a bucket. You want to see total size of a bucket. All that will be shown. So all that information you can configure. This is the default that you basically get to see. OK, so that's default. Then comes next, which is inventory reports. Now in the inventory reports, it basically shows you the inventory. So you need to enable the API for it. So let's just enable it. OK, so here you can configure the inventory report. Basically, you can configure a report and with that report, let's say there are thousands of objects in your bucket and you want to get some report, probably based on certain criteria, which is this. So you can create a report name. Let's say I can put it a name, sample report. And I can choose the metadata fields that let's say I want to get all my objects in the bucket, which are from a specific location or specific size. All that you can select all the contents, then continue. Then you can select a destination path and say another bucket where you will put the report, the path of that bucket. For example, you have like this, and then you can select the bucket. I will say over here, you will see multiple buckets. For example, I want to put the report in this bucket testing 107. So you can select the bucket over here, the bucket over here, in this bucket, the report will be created in this destination path. And then you can run this report. So every day you will get inventory of your buckets based on the objects, based on the certain metadata of it. So that's a simple inventory part that you can do from here. OK, so that's on the inventory. So we're not creating it because any which ways we will not keep these buckets. Then comes operations. Now, what are my operations? It says no running operations. Operations basically means if there is any activity that is happening in the bucket, it is like logging the bucket. If there is any activity which is happening in the bucket with respect to some data is being copied, some data is being written to the bucket, some access is happening, all that you will find here. It says no running operation. Operations running on a bucket may be initiated by other users, automated systems. Completed operations will be shown for several days after they finish. So you will see the operations here and the status of the operation, whether that operation is completed, whether that operation is failed, all that you will find here. So that's the operations. So these are my options when it comes to the bucket. Is everyone with me on this? Next. So we are done with all the options. Let's go to the monitoring tab. And here you see the observability page that you have seen that comes basically from here. That's the observability page. Then comes the settings. Settings basically means some additional configurations that you can define at the project level. So let's say by default, you want all your buckets to be configured with block public access. You don't want Google to ask you every time whether you want to enable public access, you want to deny public access. You can configure those settings at the project level here. It says a project is required for creating, enabling, and using all Google Cloud services. So here you can configure the settings. It says identifying your project. This is the project cloud storage service account. This is the service account of your project. So you can see these are the cloud storage IDs. So all that information you will see here. And since this is an organization, since I'm using an organization, this next turn is part of cloudexpert.com organization. So I can also configure organization settings. This is for interoperability, which is what is the storage URL. This is the URL that you can configure in third-party applications when they want to connect with Google Cloud storage buckets. So you will see the options here. If you want to set Nextern GCP training as default project, you can set Nextern training as default project. So every time you will log in, you will come to this project. You can create access key for your account also if you want to do some CLI operations, PowerShell operations, you can create access key also. So these are some of the options which are under setting, right? Now that we have seen all the options here, what are we going to do? Now we are going to create a public bucket. Instead of creating a private bucket that is not accessible over the internet, we are going to create a public bucket and see whether we are able to access the object or not. Okay. So let's click on create once again. Put the bucket name. I can say my name -public -2024. Let's see whether it is available. It's available. Continue. Location is regional. Continue. Default class is standard. Continue. And here I will uncheck this box. Enforce public access prevention on this bucket. I will uncheck and I'll say fine grain. Fine grain basically means when I will upload the data, I will have the capability to define whether I want that object to be accessible or not. So I will go with the opposite of what we chose in the first option. So I'm disabling public access. I'm enabling public access and I'm going with fine grained, which is specify access to individual objects by using object level permissions in addition to your bucket level permissions. So continue. Retention, I will not enable it. Encryption, I'll go with the default encryption and I'll create this bucket. So now I'm creating a bucket which is public in nature, wherein I can define whether I want the object to be accessible or not. So this is my public bucket that I've created. Now here I will upload a file. So I'll upload this file. So my file is uploaded. You can see here. Now I'll click on this file and I will configure the access of this file also. Edit access. And here you can see I will configure the access. Edit access. If you don't rely on individual object level access, you can start managing all access uniformly at the bucket level. Go to the bucket permission tab to get started. So here I can configure the owner and the access for owner for project, entity, project 1, project 2. I can select the information that I want to configure for what. For example, project 1, public, entity, name, all users, access, what kind of access I want to give reader access. Like this. See. It says the object is public and can be accessed by anyone on the internet. Now it says public access. It is public to internet. So as soon as I enable the public access, I will get a public URL also. So I will get a public URL. I'll copy this URL, open another browser, which is Firefox. This is similar to what you do in Azure and AWS. Some options are here and there, but almost the same experience. I'll put the public URL, hit enter, and I should be able to access this object. You can see here, I'm able to access the object. So this is an old presentation, which basically differentiates between Azure, AWS, and GCP. I'll share the URL with you in the chat window. Please tell me whether you're able to access it or not.
Yeah, we are able to access it.
Yeah, able to access.
Okay, great. So that's the concept of public. I'm saying you can see that now the object is accessible. So we have got two URLs. Authenticated URL basically means if you use this URL, whosoever wants to access the object will have to log in to Google Cloud, and then the person must have access to the object or to the bucket. Then only it will be accessible. And public URL basically means since you've enabled public access, it will be accessible to anyone out there. That's public URL basically. So that's the concept of public URL. So what I will do, I will edit access once again, and I'll say, no, don't do it public. I will put the access at project level, or I'll just delete this option. And save it. So I cannot remove all ACL. I will need to at least give one ACL, which is I'll say the access is at the project level. And name I can put domain. Okay, leave that part.
You need to give email now.
Sorry.
No, you given the email ID and you select the project.
No. So I was just because I deleted everything, so it doesn't allow you to delete. These are the default settings basically. So I've removed this is the default setting. You can change these settings. Edit access basically means that you can default settings. This is the default setting that I've created. So I can add entries or I can remove entry, but minimum one entry has to be there. For example, this is the one entry. So I'm making it public, accessible to all users with reader access, right? And save it. So one entry has to be there in the edit field. That's what it tries to say. OK, so that's about the that how do we go about configuring a bucket for public usage or private usage. So this is how if you specifically want to share any data with people out there, you just need to navigate to your bucket. Make sure now the challenge that you need to understand is if you're I'm saying when it comes to the permission, for example, this bucket, this bucket is prevented for public access, you can see public access subject to ACL. So if I go to this bucket has no, not this bucket. If I go to the previous bucket, which is testing bucket, this is the bucket. This bucket has multiple objects. If I go to any object and edit its access, let's say I'm editing the access of any object of this bucket, what it says, cannot get legacy ACL for an object when uniform bucket level access is enabled. So what it says that if you want to edit any object level access, you will first need to disable, you will need to enable public access or disable public access protection on the bucket. So you cannot edit access for this bucket for any of the object you cannot access here. Any object that I want to grant access, I will not be able to create public URL here. It will give me an error. So if I want to fix it, I will need to navigate to this bucket permissions. And over here, I will need to remove public access prevention of this bucket like this. So I've removed public access prevention. I'll refresh. Now it will say public. It is taking time to. Then I'll switch to fine grained. Like this. Now I've switched to fine grained. This bucket is also configured. It is public access. You can see it's publicly accessible. Now I can go to the objects of this bucket and I can configure the I can configure the access. For example, I want to share, let's say, G-Cloud commands with you. So I'll click on this object, edit access, add entry. I will say public, all users or authenticated all users, and I can give reader access. Save it. It will generate the public URL I can put that public URL. I can share it with you. You should be able to access it. So that is how you can change the existing setting of a bucket. You can see here. Now I'm able to access this document. So I'll share this document with you guys. So you should be able to access it. I'm saying if your browser supports, if your browser has a software that can open the document, it will open it. Otherwise, you will get the download option. So that's how you basically manage the bucket. These are all the options in Google Cloud when it comes to the bucket. So we've seen lifecycle, we've seen configuration, permissions. We've gone through all the tabs and we have exercised all the options which are there in a cloud storage bucket. Now there is one thing that we have not exercised, which I'm giving you as a assignment today. I want you to basically do it yourself and show it to me tomorrow. Otherwise, I will cover it tomorrow itself, which is hosting a static website from Google Cloud Storage Bucket. This option is directly available in AWS and Azure as part of bucket configuration, wherein it says static website hosting, and you can directly exercise it. However, this option is not directly available in, I'm saying it is not directly available here in Google Cloud. There are other methods to invoke this option. So I want you to identify that option actually. So hosting a static website from Google Cloud Storage Bucket is your assignment for today. This is your assignment that you need to do. And these are the hands-on labs that we exercise today. Navigating through all configuration options in the GCS portal. So that's what we did today. And this is your assignment for today. Let's see who is able to complete this assignment, who is able to show me tomorrow the process of hosting a static website. Just try to keep it simple. Don't just go ahead and use multiple services. Just try to keep it as simple as possible as we do it in Azure and AWS. Is that OK from everyone?
Yes, sir.
OK. That is all for today, guys. I don't want to start any new topic because we are not left with much time. So we'll close the session now. Please join the session on time tomorrow. And to all of the participants who joined today, please make sure that you practice all the options, all the configurations which are available in a cloud storage bucket, starting from objects till operations. Please make sure go through all of them. And if you have any questions, make a note of it, discuss it tomorrow when we start the session. This is very important service. 99% of the organizations who are using Google Cloud, they are using cloud storage bucket service because this is an object storage service and every organization needs an object storage to store backup data, to store historical data, to store any current data that needs to be accessed by applications all the time. So this is very important service that you need to be aware of because in your project, in your operations, with respect to Google Cloud, you will get 20 to 30% requests related to buckets only, wherein you will be required to make the configuration modifications in the bucket, wherein you will be required to troubleshoot the bucket access issues and other aspects with respect to bucket. So this is very important topic from the operational perspective that you need to make sure to have good comfort level with. That is all for today, guys. We'll close the session now if you don't have any questions. Any questions, guys?
Raghuveer,
Yes,
I
Madan.
see access. I have access to only storage, is it?
Right
No
now,
other
you
than-
only have access to the storage. As in
Okay.
when we do more topics, I will keep on adding access. So
Yeah.
example, today we focused on bucket and you have been granted storage admin access, which means every minute activity related to storage services, you should be able to perform with this level of access.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, great. However, guys, as I said, this is a paid account. I have granted you access to my my paid account as a goodwill gesture because I'm still working with your management to get this sorted out, the access part. But just not to affect this training, I've granted you access. So make sure that you are not uploading any large file into the bucket unnecessarily. And then once you're done with your practice, please delete your bucket and all the data. Now that's important thing that how do we delete it? So for example, if I want to delete this bucket, this public bucket, I will select the bucket and hit delete. It says the action will permanently delete the bucket and the object it contains, including versions from Google Cloud. Data will not be recoverable. It will not be recoverable because you're deleting the bucket. But if you delete an object from a bucket where you have enabled soft delete, then you will be able to recover the objects. But if you delete a bucket, then it's permanently deleted. So since I don't need it, I will just copy delete, paste it here and hit delete. So that's how I can delete a bucket. Same way you will need to delete your buckets once you're done with your practice. Don't just keep stale entries into the into the project. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you all for today's session. To remain attentive in the session, please practice as much as you can. Tomorrow we will start the session with seeing if anyone is able to host a static website, and then we'll probably move on to the next topic, which is the other storage services that we need to cover. Thank you.